Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm your host, Deniz Arslan, and you're listening to another interview from BRWC with Cheese. Today's guest is filmmaker, writer, and actress Izabel Pakzad. Although many people may have first known her as an actress, she has now made her feature directorial debut with Find Your Friends, a thriller inspired by a traumatic experience she went through herself. After premiering at the Fantasia International Film Festival, the film made its way to Shudder last month, introducing audience to a bold new voice in independent horror. I recently had the chance to watch the film, and what struck me most wasn't just its violence or its revenge story, but the question it raises about fear, female friendship, trauma, and the way audience respond to those themes. So today we'll be talking about the real life experience behind the film, the reactions it has received since its release, some of its most talked about moments, and Isabel's journey from acting to directing. I hope you enjoy our conversation. I'd love to start with something that immediately came to my mind after learning the story behind Find Your Friends. Uh, there's a quote by Carrie Fisher that I've always loved: take your broken heart and turn it into art. The moment I learned that this film was inspired by something you actually went through, that quote immediately came to mind. In a way, were the events at the end of the film a form of revenge against that traumatic experience?
Yes, in a way, it was a therapeutic process for me to take this sort of traumatizing experience and turn it into art and sort of flip the script of what actually happened. Because obviously, that none of the stuff that happened in the movie happened in real life, but it was my way of sort of releasing that rage and anger toward the situation and turning it into something um, extreme, but also a way to release all of that.
Mhm. During your speech at the film's premiere, you mentioned that the friends who were with you during the real life incident that inspired the film were also there on opening night. Watching something they actually lived through become a movie must have been a pretty surreal experience for them. How did they react to the film? And what about the group of friends at the center of the film? Were those characters entirely fictional, or did you base them on your real life friends?
um, it was, I think, pretty surreal for them to watch the movie because obviously the movie was inspired by something that happened to us in Joshua Tree. Um, so I think for them seeing it and then seeing it also completely change, like we just talked about, like the ending, like I think it was shocking for them. But yeah, it was loosely inspired by my friend. Loosely, you know what I mean? I obviously fictionalized certain characters, and I obviously had pushed things to the extreme with the
Mhm.
characters. But overall, they are all loosely inspired by people in my friend group, um, and it is also loosely inspired by just like college party culture talk, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Um, but yeah, there's specific, even though some of it doesn't actually come to fruition in the movie, like each character has their backstory about why they are the way they are. And you don't necessarily see that in the film, but it was definitely there. And when I would talk to the actresses about their characters, because obviously, it's not, the movie isn't just about you know, these women partying, like I obviously gave context to the girls about like why they are the way they are, like why they're talking this way and where they come from.
Mhm.
And and I and I explained to them the real people and why they were that way too. So yeah, for sure.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Uh,
Yeah.
In a previous conversation, you told me I feel misunderstood, and I think some people are completely missing what the film is trying to say. And honestly, I found myself feeling the same way. Like I told you back then, it felt as if a lot of people
Mhm.
got stuck on themes like toxic friendships or Gen Z relationships and built their entire criticism around those aspects. But from my perspective, aside from a few narrative shortcomings, the film is pretty much excellent across the board, technically and in many other ways as well. The film has only just came out, but what has disappointed you the most about some of the negative reactions so far?
Um, I think I think there's a bigger picture with the film, and you know, people can have their opinions. Obviously, everyone's entitled to their opinions, and it's not for everyone. But I made something that I knew would potentially provoke and cause or cause people to have a big reaction. But
Mhm.
of course, that was the intention of the movie. And when you watch it, you know, I hope that people understand that that's sort of part of what I was doing. Do you know what I mean? And it feels like that is being a little maybe it just feels like the movie's misunderstood. I'm it's making also a larger statement about the way young women are represented in films, especially in horror films. And I think that um, it's really a rebellion against what has been the structure and the narrative for so long around young women and the final girl in
Mhm.
horror films. And I'm coming in and I'm changing all of that, and flipping it on its head. And that's also, aside from all the narrative stuff in the movie, the bigger thing I'm doing is really rebellious, and it's actually very empowering as a woman to see women in this light in a movie like this, because they're allowed to have their rage and get their revenge and potentially become the villains, if you really think about it,
Yeah.
but they're celebrated for that. And I feel like that is what people are missing, that it's actually a really powerful thing. Um, if you think about what the movie is doing just for the narrative of young women, and whether people agree with the way the women are talking, or if it's a commentary on Gen Z or whatever that is, the bigger picture is, for me, something greater than that. And I would hope and still hope that when people watch it, that is something that they take away from it.
Right, great. Thank you so much. There are countless films about men seeking revenge, right? The industry seems perfectly happy to build an entire revenge story around a man's dog being killed. But when it comes to female characters, there's always felt like a gap. Of course, films like Revenge and I Spit on Your Grave exist, and they're important films, but they're nowhere near as common as revenge stories centered on male protagonists. Beyond the fact that this story came from your own experience, was there also a part of you that wanted to help fill that gap within the genre?
100%. Yeah. And that's sort of like what we were just talking about in earlier questions. Like, it feels like there's a lack of movies like this one where, and we need more of them. And I think that I maybe subconsciously was craving it in a way. You know what I mean? And I
Mhm.
had seen a few films that sort of scratched the itch, but there weren't enough. So I think maybe in the back of my mind when I was writing this one,
Yeah,
it was something I was intentionally doing.
yeah. Uh, Thanks so
Yeah.
much. Uh,
So yes. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, thanks so much. One of the film's most unforgettable moments is the castration scene in the final. What I found especially interesting isn't just the scene itself, but the conversation it sparked. Horror has a long history of using violence against women's bodies for shock value, but your film completely turns that dynamic on its head. I noticed that many women describe the scene as funny, satisfying, or even empowering, while a lot of men seem to find it disturbing or difficult to watch. Did those different reactions surprise you, or were they exactly the kind of conversation you hoped the scene would spark?
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I anticipated, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to be a sort of mixed reaction, um, and everyone's gonna have their opinion on it. You know what I mean? And it's a big scene. It's a big climax. And I think the idea was to spark a conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Whether that's a negative or positive, I do think it's meant to spark a conversation, and I think we did that. So mission accomplished.
yeah. Uh, Thanks so much. Uh, One thing I found really interesting is that the film shows not only the support women can give each other, but also the betrayal and toxicity that can exist within female friendships. Why was it important for you to highlight those toxic dynamics? What made you to want to portray female solidarity in such a realistic way instead of romanticizing it?
Yeah, I think sometimes in films at least there's this sort of myth that women always support women and in general, as
Yeah,
friends, as partners, as whatever it is. And I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And especially, young female friendships, I think, we're in a time where you're growing into yourself and there's a lot of pressure to behave a certain way and be a certain way to be accepted in society, whatever that is, whether that's college or your workplace or whatever. And I think that we are taught a certain way to be, and sometimes we project that onto each other. And I think it creates a really interesting dynamic of how can we really show up for each other when we're constantly burdened with that paradox. And how can healthy female friendships sort of flourish when there's a constant pressure. And I think especially women in their young 20s or late teens,
yeah,
like these college girls in the film, like it's a really crucial time where uh, you're taught a lot about how you should be, and 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 I think it just creates a really complicated sort of way to communicate with other women. And
mhm,
I wanted to just authentically show that. And just in general, like friendships are messy and they are sometimes aggressive and volatile, but they can also be amazing and caring and genuine. So I think there's always a balance with any relationship too.
yeah. Thank you so much. You said before that you reject the final girl trope as a filmmaker. Why was it important to you that these characters be messy, chaotic, and flawed rather than sweet, innocent victims?
Um, yeah, I just think that um, I love genre movies and I really do. But the one thing that feels so repetitive and so predictable is just this idea that we know almost immediately who the final girl is going to be. And I think that I want to see women be able to behave in many different ways and still be able to live in the end. Like these girls get to be, messy, they get to be unapologetic, they are volatile sometimes,
Yeah.
and but they still, get to take their power back
Hmm.
in this sort of violent way, but they get to be celebrated for that. And I
Yeah.
think that's really just something that we don't see often in horror films. And as a female filmmaker, I really wanted to try to flip the script. And that's important to me because it's good to see female characters be angry and unapologetic and sometimes not what you would expect. Um, and that was something that I was excited about exploring.
All right. Thank you so much. My last question is, besides being a filmmaker, I honestly think you're a terrific actress as well. Do you already
Thank
have
you.
any new projects in the works? And from now on, do you see yourself spending more time behind the camera or in front of it?
Thank you for saying that. And good question. I think I'm definitely way more interested in being behind the camera, but I haven't lost my interest in love for acting either. So if it felt
Mhm.
like something was right, I would totally go for it. But I'm very interested in creating things and writing things and telling my own stories. And that's really important to me. But if the right acting opportunity comes along, I will gladly take it.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think definitely a little bit of both for sure.